Who are you?
I'm John Horgan. Who are you?
I am Nardwuar, the human serviette.
Good to see you, Serviette. Or can I call you the?
You can call me Nardwuar, the human serviette, or whatever you want.
Sounds good to me. Nardwuar, the human serviette.
And right off the bat, John, I have a gift for you, a Tommy Douglas LP.
I have to tell you, I've got this one.
You have it.
Greatest hits, I do, absolutely.
Well, then that is for David Eby.
Okay, I'll pass it on to David when I see him. Can we put him up here?
What can you say about that record? Actually, if you could hold it right there, what can you say about this record since you have it?
It's in a box in the basement. I was given it when I asked for a photograph of Tommy Douglas, and I have a photograph in my office. And I remember, oh gosh, it was about 10 years ago, someone came in and said, "Oh, is that a picture of your grandfather?" And I said, "No, it's Kiefer Sutherland's grandfather." And she looked at me sideways and just backed out of the room. But this is the greatest hits of speeches and comments that Tommy Douglas has made over the years.
From the NDP.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, what I was curious was this record of Tommy Douglas right here. Have you seen this one right here?
No.
Quote, "You can lock up a mouse, but you can't lock up an idea."
Well, this is about Mouseland, I bet, and it's a great story. And I've got that in hard copy and as well as audio. And it's about why the mice always vote one time for the black cats, another time for the white cats. It's a great story about why don't you vote for the mice?
The Renfrew New Democrats.
The Renfrew New Democrats, not Port Renfrew, I hope.
No, the Renfrew New Democrats. And look what date is from.
1962.
June 5th, 1962 at Queen's Park.
Queen's Park in Toronto. This
Actually, in Vancouver.
Queen's Park. Oh, that Queen's Park. Well, Renfrew is in Ontario, and that Queen's Park might well be Queen's Park that's where the legislature is in Toronto.
Oh, I would like to think it is Queen's Park in Vancouver.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Now, Queen's Park Arena has terrible memories for me. I played lacrosse growing up, and I would always come to New Westminster, play there, and we always lost because they have a wooden floor. That's a longer story. Nardwuar, we'll leave that for another day.
It's amazing, John, that you have all these Tommy collectibles.
Well, I got involved in the NDP because I met Tommy Douglas when I was at university. I was writing a paper, and one of my roommates came in and said, "Hey, this guy's speaking out at the campus. You should come and hear him." And I thought, "Who's Tommy Douglas? I'd never heard of him before." And so I ended up going out, and I was captivated.
Was it hard to get the 45 or the recording?
Well, it was easy. You just handed it to me.
Babu?
Babu.
And I have another gift for you, John, right here. An Archie comic from
Expo.
Expo.
You know what? This is the only comic book in the BC Legislature Library. You know how I know that? I had a group of kids from Souk coming through for a tour. I always take kids to the library because it's the best part of the legislative building. And one of the kids said, "Are there any comic books here?" There's 500,000 documents. And they said, "Are there any comic books?" And I said, "No." And the reference librarian said, "Yes, there's one. Betty and Veronica go to Expo."
What can you say about Betty and Veronica going to Expo?
I was always a Betty fan, not a Veronica fan. I think that might be a class thing. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. But I remember 1986 like it was just the year before 1987.
You sold brick shares to your mom?
I did. I made a profit. I might be the only one that made a profit. As soon as they came in the house, I said, "I don't want these." And my mom said, "I'll give you $7." So I ended up getting $35. I think they're worth $6 when they arrived.
Can you explain about the brick shares?
It was a scam that the...
a scam?
Scam. Well, imagine that, associating scams with the Social Credit Party. But yeah, it was a scam by Bill Bennett, the premier at the time, to try and convince British Columbians that they had a stake in BC. Well, we all have a stake in BC. Our natural resources belong to us already, but Bennett wanted to give them something tangible to pretend. I've got, someone gave me brick shares. They were issued on my birthday, August 7th, so I have them framed and on my wall. They're worth absolutely nothing. I sold mine at the high part of the market when my mom was prepared to pay for them.
What can you say about that era of social credit? For instance, this record is by B.J. Roberts, and he has a song, Bonkers, all about what Grace McCarthy said.
Okay.
What can you say about that era of the social credit government?
This would have been like the 80s, early 80s, I guess. I was living in Ontario. I grew up on the island. I went to university in Ontario and then to Australia. So I missed the greatest hits of the Grace McCarthy period. When I came back to BC in 1986, Van der Zalm was just become the premier. So it was going downhill fast at that point.
Another bit of BC history.
It is indeed.
B.J. Roberts, bonkers.
Bonkers, indeed. I'd never heard of B.J. Roberts until right now.
Have you heard the word bonkers used in relation to BC politics?
Yes, I have. Not just by you, but by others.
In what respect?
Well, sometimes it is bonkers what goes on around here, and I think that it's time to change the bonkers and bring in a little bit more common sense, and that's what I hope to do.
You mentioned this earlier, the lacrosse. You love the lacrosse. What can you say about John and the lacrosse?
Well, that's me with a lot more hair. That's my best friend Lyle Gurney, and that's my big brother Brian, and we were coaching lacrosse at that time. I grew up playing lacrosse. It was a passion of mine, still a passion. I mentioned Queen's Park Arena connected to lacrosse. So it's a great game. It was a way for me to show a little bit of leadership and to mentor younger people, and I've been doing that sort of thing ever since.
If we could turn it over, we see another pic.
Yeah, more hair, still more hair. Yeah.
Now that is you in action.
That's me. No, it's not in action. I'm standing still. That's bonkers, standing still.
Now, quite a bit of like an ass-kicking vibe, isn't there? You've said in McLean's you were quite an ass kicker.
I was, well, you're carrying a stick and you're allowed to knock people over. So that's another part of lacrosse that separates it from other sports. But yeah, I gave as good as I got. And I can consider myself someone who would protect the most vulnerable. And it's easier to do when you've got a stick in your hand.
You look right there really tough.
Oh, well, thanks.
How could these traits help with becoming premier of BC?
I think you need to have a mix of kindness and toughness. And I've got a good measure of kindness. I've spent most of my life helping other people. And now I think a little bit of toughness is in order. I know the BC Liberals are going to be throwing big mountains of mud at me, and I've got to let that go by and focus on the things that matter to people. And I can take the attacks, but I don't think the public deserves to be attacked anymore. Disabled people losing their bus passes, for example, or the vulnerable trying to make ends meet while the premier gets 2 salaries. Those are the sorts of things that I want to change, and that's what I'm going to try to do in the next 35 days.
I tried to check out sayanythingjohn.ca, but I couldn't find it. It was deleted. What's going on there?
I don't know. I think the Liberals discovered that people think that Christy Clark will say anything, and so it wasn't really working for them.
What would I find there? Sayanythingjohn.ca.
Those are people that got more money than brains, and they put up an attack website, and I guess it wasn't working, so they took it down.
I would like to ask you lastly about this record I have, the top 5%.
Focusing on the top 2.
The top 5%. What can you say about the top 5%?
It looks like they play chess, and that's all I can tell you about it. Yeah, I like the cover. The jacket cover is nice.
John
Horgan.
You mentioned that you love games.
I do.
Would you play the hip flip game with me?
I would not miss the hip flip game with you.
Oh, that is amazing because Jack Layton did the
hip flip game.
Whoa, oh my God. And of course, Justin Trudeau did the
hip flip game.
And Christy Clark did the...
Did she do the hip flip game?
She did the hip flip game.
Well, then I'm in.
And will you, John, do the hip flip game?
I will do the hip flip game. Now it's
Why should people care about the NDP? Why should people care?
I think it's time for a government that puts people first, and for the past 16 years, we've had a government that's focused on the wealthy and the well-to-do. It's time that people had a premier that was working for them, and I want that to be me.
Well, thanks so much, John. Keep on rocking in a free world, and doot doot doo.
Doot doot. Doot doot.